Is he concerned for his own safety if Diddy was to walk free? Well, I can delightedly say that Big Homie is with me here in London in the main studio. Big Homie, welcome.
Hello, sir. Thank you
You're
for having me.
You're in the heart of Uncensored here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. I'm glad to be here.
Why are you here, first of all, in London?
Well, I have a lot of engagements, speaking events, a lot of podcasts. So I'm really on a European tour right now. Yes, sir. And due to the situation, the circumstances, I decided that it's probably best for me to live outside of the States at this point.
Really?
Absolutely.
So you won't be going back?
No, sir.
For how long?
Indefinitely.
Really?
Absolutely.
You've emigrated, you've left?
Yes, I've left.
Wow, why?
We've got some intel about certain things, and shout out to my brother Dugar and the rest of our team. There are some adequate and imminent threats to me. And, I made an agreement with my mother that at a certain age that I would eventually, try to settle down, have a family, and I wouldn't partake in violent acts and stuff like that anymore in the line of work. So, I always took my education seriously growing up, and my mom did a well job to make sure myself and my brother were cultured. So it's been a nice integration process for me. I'm loving London right now.
You think you'll set up home here?
Definitely.
Really?
Absolutely.
You feel safer here?
Definitely I do. Absolutely I do. I'm at the local Sainsbury's and people stopping me after our first interview, a lot of people tuned in.
3 million people watched that interview. It was huge.
Right, that's huge, that's huge.
Did you get a lot of reaction to it?
I got a huge, almost an overwhelming reaction. A lot of support. A lot of people were really interested to see you and I have a conversation.
Yes.
And a lot of people were pleased by it. So
I've got some reaction here. We took some comments off the Uncensored YouTube channel.
No doubt.
Eve Carr said, I've literally fallen in love with Big Homie. Wow. There's nothing more attractive than a man genuinely wanting to protect women and kids. I hope he stays safe.
Wow.
And then Gerald Slivka said, you, sir, have huge balls. He means you, for doing this interview. Hats off to you. I applaud you for what you and your team are doing. I hope you and yours are well protected. And at Think IT said, Homie was very, very careful. You can tell he knows a lot. He just can't say it on air. I hope this guy is safe and continues to do what he does best. On that last point, are you careful? Have you been careful about what you say publicly?
Yeah, very, very, very careful how transparent I am. Due to the fact that, there are still victims that I want to protect their identities. And I just feel like a proper gentleman should always be wary of his etiquette. And, I'm far from a slouch. I'm a formidable opponent for anyone, but no man is invincible. And Father Time is undefeated. I'm not 20, 21 years old anymore. It takes a longer time to recover from things. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been poisoned, you name it. And, in order for a man to combat evil, sometimes he must be able to enact evil as well. And, violence is not my identity. I'm just a toolbox a tool in my toolbox, I should say, because, you got to be wary of guys in positions of power who, if you spend a lot of money for a wedding and stuff like that, on rings to court a lady, just to be urinating on her and sharing her with male sex workers and stuff like that, your moral compass is skewed and it's flawed.
You mean like Diddy?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What have you, we obviously spoke near the start of the trial. We're now at the end of the trial, waiting for the final arguments. Some interesting things. Just before we came on air, the prosecutors announced they've dropped some of the predicate acts in their case against him, including attempted kidnapping and arson, to simplify, they say, jury instructions. But the central charges remain unchanged, with the government now focused on forced labour and sex trafficking. I've interestingly interviewed a lot of people, some of them with direct involvement here. For example, the male prostitute, Sheree Hayes, known as the Punisher. He was fascinating in that interview because it's certainly from his testimony, both in court and then to me. Let's take a look at a little clip of this. At the centre of this, it seems to me, is going to be the issue of consent, as to whether she was consenting to all this as a willing participant in this. What is your view? Do you believe this was all consensual? Or do you think that, as the prosecution want the jury to believe, this was all coercion, control, and criminal?
Well, obviously I'm only privy to the circumstances that I was a part of. And as similar to I testified to, I didn't get any cues, didn't have any thing that would lead me to believe in the moment that she was under any duress or any forced scenario. It was presented to me that this was something that she wanted to create for her husband. You know, for the majority of the time I interacted with them, I believed they were a married couple. And I believed, based on me following them on Instagram and whatever interactions that I seen, although minimally, it seemed like a normal situation. I didn't get any cues to it being a distressful environment.
What was interesting about that, in the cross-examination of Cassie Ventura, text messages came out that certainly suggested she was a willing participant. One message from 2012, she wrote to Combs, "Besides making love, talking to you is my favorite thing." 5 years later, she told him in a series of messages she missed him. She asked him to send a picture of his genitalia. She pledged to be, quotes, "your little freak." You know, how significant do you think all that is going to be in terms of creating a picture to a jury, perhaps, that this was consensual? It may not be what people like. It might be, as you said, actually pretty disgusting in parts, but that's just a moral verdict. It's not a criminal.
Right. When it comes to this situation, I always feel like, you know, as a man, you should always be a calm, collected leader. And there's a psychological aspect to this that people are overlooking. I think it's crass. I feel like it's asinine. I think it's an egregious situation simply because this is a situation I would call a trauma bond. And in the work that I do, last year we brought home 17 missing women, 4 children, three girls, 1 little boy. And always the nature of the relationship between the trafficker and the trafficked is indeed a trauma bond. So they might not feel like what they're doing is a process of being oppressed, but to them, they are in love with their oppressor, so they're willing to do anything to appease them because they look up to them and respect them. Because when you look at a lot of situations where child molestation takes place, it's usually by somebody very close, and there's a relationship between them that I've seen between street pimps and sex walkers, street walkers. I feel like people aren't taking into consideration that when people are in love, especially when a lady is in love with a guy, he's powerful, he's wealthy, you know.
And violent.
And violent.
We saw from the video, the infamous video of him beating Cassie up in the hotel corridor.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any man that's prepared to do that to a woman in a hotel corridor where you must know there are cameras.
Yes.
Anyone prepared to do that with such impunity and so violently.
Yes.
Yeah, this is why, although all her messaging looks consensual, although what the Punisher told me appeared to be consensual, in the back of my mind, and it must be in the back of, I know, it's sort of crazy. Although, actually, I've got to say, he was a likable guy.
Yeah, and see, this wasn't even his...
He didn't even know it was Diddy the whole time,
He didn't,
right?
and that's the thing, and this wasn't even his profession. He was a male
He's a
performer.
dancer,
He was a dancer.
Yeah.
And you know, that's what I'm saying. He coerced him into this. It's something, that's why we call him a zest monster. He coerced this person into this, and, you know, had he compensated this young lady properly for the services she provided for him, this never happened. You know, he made a $30 million payment to her. You know, innocence doesn't cost that much. And I feel like it's a telltale sign.
That's a very interesting comment. It doesn't cost that much.
No,
I
sir.
agree. And I also interviewed Diddy's former friend Ray J, who had done a bit of an about turn about him. Let's take a look at that. What is your view of how this case is going?
I think it's kind of becoming a circus, and with all the allegations, and now with everybody explaining like what's happening in the bedroom, I mean, every day it just sounds crazier and crazier and freakier and weirder, right? And I'm like trying to understand, with all this being said, like with Kid Cudi going on and saying everything that happened, but then ended up saying Cassie played both of us. You know, it's like, where are we trying to go? Are we just trying to like tell all of these crazy stories and then that equals out to sex trafficking? I mean, it's starting to become outrageous. It's a RICO case. It's really only Diddy and maybe one other person. Like, I'm just starting to feel uncomfortable, and I'm starting to feel weird about this whole thing.
What do you feel about that?
Okay.
Do you know Ray J?
This guy, I seen him, Diddy, and F. Gary Gray in Vegas together on some very strange timing, I should say. And
What do you mean?
that guy is privy to a lot of things that take place at those events, because he was there for a lot of them.
Really?
Absolutely. You know,
You saw him?
I've seen Ray J. And I feel like, you know, kind of aggravating, like watching people try to make it seem as if Cassie is the problem in the situation when the person that's on trial attempted to pay her for her silence. Furthermore, in the onset of this case, in its inception, Diddy was coming under fire for trying to tamper with witnesses while he was arrested. There are several people who were initially named to be witnesses. They just magically disappeared because, you know, News Nation had reached out to me to do an interview about this. And, you know, I turned it down because I told them, I like, look, you know, I'm putting myself at risk here. You know, you're going to have to offer me some type of compensation. They go with Ray J instead of me. When I told them previously that he was there. So it's kind of like, okay, well, it's almost as if it's a conspiracy going on. Because where is the gentleman who provided feds with some of the tapes from these parties who was supposed to be a witness? He's not involved. If you look at the case with Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, when the bodyguard went AWOL, there was no warrant for his arrest. In the Diddy case, there's no warrant, no contempt for that person. But let's look at the Nipsey Hussle situation, when some of the witnesses that were there that were actually shot with him, they got warrants for their arrest when they didn't show up for court. Why is it not in this situation?
I also interviewed Suge Knight from his prison. He claimed that Ray J and Diddy were lovers.
Absolutely.
That's true?
Yes.
You know that for a fact?
Yeah, all of these guys, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, Piers, you don't want to be the only straight male at a party for people who under the rainbow situation, right? You don't want to be that guy, because if someone starts to hit on you in there, now you're the idiot because you're at their situation. How are you upset? What are you here for? So that's why, you know, I would always, if I would get a call from a client and they're going to one of these events, I'm gonna sit in the car. You know, if it comes down to being dangerous, call me, I'll come in, I'm gonna demonstrate immediately.
Do you think Diddy was actually gay?
I think he's a bisexual man, absolutely. All of these rapper dudes, and most of them are, man. Like,
Really?
Yeah, I can tell you, off camera, I'll tell you some stuff.
But in this interview I did with Suge Knight, he also pretty much intimated that Diddy was directly involved in killing Tupac and trying to kill him. Obviously, he was in the car as well. What do you know about that?
The gentleman, Dwayne Keith Davis, who is currently in a Clark County jail because of this, he stated clearly that after the death of Tupac, Diddy called him and said, was that us? Because he was compensating his group to keep him safe as he maneuvered through certain areas. And you know, living in a hip hop life, situations can become tumultuous fast. So you definitely want to have that street element along with a private protection element. And he had that. And FBI confirmed that there was a payment made for the unaliving of the rapper. Said that the payment got intercepted by Eric Von Zip, who was known for doing things like this. You know, $1 million check goes out, he intercepts it. You know, what is Keefy D gonna do? Call the cops? It's not. A lot of activity takes place, and it's people like me who get calls about it, because like I became a fixer for people after a while. You know, I have my own company, my own team, and a lot of times people would call me when things are like sticky. And you know, I made it very clear to these people, like, you know, y'all gonna become enemies of mine because of the way y'all treat ladies, the way y'all treat women, the way his sons operate. Yeah, I'll never ever just lay down and die about it. You know, if you stand for something, you know, if you see something, you should say something. And I first started speaking out years ago. People told me I was crazy. They don't say such things anymore.
Right.
Absolutely.
So just on Diddy and Tupac and Suge Knight, obviously, do you personally believe he was pretty directly involved?
Absolutely.
No doubt.
No doubt about it.
And do you think the whole hip hop world knows that?
Yes. Yeah, in the hip hop world, it's common knowledge. Absolutely.
What does that tell you about the kind of man Diddy is then?
You ever notice that you always see this gentleman in a towel, shirtless, in his underpants all the time? Why you always half naked in the middle of the day? And you know, there's a video of him saying that he's a savage. And he's screaming this, and he's saying that whatever he wants, he's gonna get. And he said it by any means, and this shows that.
Do you think he's capable and in fact has caused people to be killed?
Yes.
Multiple times?
I'm not gonna infer, I'm not gonna invent or make up details, but very few people who have that type of personality that they feel like they can have whatever they want, very few of those people are safe to be around, especially if they're in an inebriated state. You know, he was arrested while under indictment. You know, he was arrested with narcotics, defaced firearms. If you're under federal indictment, you probably don't want to walk around with large amounts of cocaine on you. What happened to the gentleman who was arrested getting on the private jet with him, who was his mule, who carried the drugs around for him? Where is he? A lot of people are just magically missing. They're not in this, are not in the indictment. They're not witnesses. And then it's a telltale sign when somebody of his stature, you have no good character witnesses. No one is going to come up there to defend you. None of your peers. I feel like where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's definitely a fire going on.
Let me play the clip from Suge Knight, because he also said what he thought was going to happen.
If Puffy got on the stand and told the truth, I know he'll walk. If he got on the stand and say, look, I'm gay and straight. I mess with guys. I mess with women. I do it all. Puffy not guilty for things he did to these people. He's guilty for being a cold, freaky man that want freaky things done to him. But in the Cassie situation, they could not say he was having sex with the men also, because that'll make him like it's an orgy. It won't be like sex trafficking. It won't be like forcing stuff to do. But at the end of the day, there's no way Puffy should go to prison for the rest of his life.
Your thoughts about that? Do you know Suge Knight?
I don't know him personally, but we have mutual friends. And I just feel like there are a lot of people who aren't familiar with the law. If you are paying people to cross state line for sexual acts, that's illegal. And everybody wants to now victim shame this woman who is obviously in a trauma bond with a guy that she loved. And I feel like along that process, she met other people who started to like, listen, look, this ain't all the way right, but there is an end game. And I feel like she followed that and it paid off for her financially. But, you know, she'll forever have to live with the shame of the details that came out. I mean, you got a guy named the Punisher in here with you and your wife. You're concealing your identity. And then once he ejaculates, the Punisher, she's taking the semen and rubbing it on Diddy's nipples. That's outrageous.
It's outrageous, and I just find it revolting. However, it's not illegal.
What is illegal is coercing people into sexual acts and then giving them payment. And then you're paying for them to travel across state lines. That violates interstate commerce. People don't know the law.
Well, I actually had Suge Knight's former lawyer, Matthew Fletcher, on a few times. And the last time he said this.
Because what you're talking about now is an allegation that this, and I'm going to use its Mandingo stereotype of this crazed black man who's being prosecuted by 5 white women who are saying this man's sexual needs are insatiable and they can have sex for hours and hours and never rest and always ejaculate. That's not true from a pharmacological standpoint. That is absurd. If this was in the 60s or 70s in Mississippi, I think people would be irate. I don't like Sean Combs. That video speaks for itself. The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for that? The question is, why wasn't he prosecuted for all of these crimes that have allegedly occurred, but we save it all up and we bring it in this case?
What do you think of that?
I feel that, okay, this is crazy, because when you get yourself in a situation like this, I feel like it's cowardice to everyone to start playing the race card. I often see people playing the race card when high-level thinking has to take place, and when people have to face the firing line of accountability. I don't think this is a situation of the race card. I feel like I don't think he's being painted as a crazed black man with an unsatisfiable sexual nature. I feel like he's a sexual deviant who thought he was bigger than the program, who felt like, you know, eventually this is all gonna go away. He has a history of ripping people off in their contracts. He has a history of not paying people who have to provide his service, and this is the same thing. At the end of the day, I feel like any man, especially a man of African descent, if you reach a certain level like that, it'll be more conducive for you to empower your circle, empower the people in your environment instead of oppressing them. If you do that, none of this takes place. The whole race car thing, I think it's cowardly. And
If he does walk, Diddy, as a lot of people think he might, I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's a really fascinating case. I think it literally comes down to whether the jury believes that this was consensual or not. If he does walk, though, would you already fear about reprisals against you just for speaking out? Would you be genuinely concerned about him coming after you? Is that one of the reasons you've left the country?
well, here's the thing, only thing I fear is God and my mom. And I made a promise to my mom that, I'm not gonna revert to an old lifestyle. And I know if he walks, I'm gonna be target number one, which is fine. I'm used to that. It's kind of exciting for me.
Is that exciting or is that slightly scary?
Oh no, it's definitely exciting, Piers.
Really?
Yeah.
Explain that, because in my world, I wouldn't find that exciting.
Well, we come from different professions.
Yes.
In my profession, it's what we live for.
Well, being someone's number one target.
Absolutely.
Really?
History was written by the best group of murderers. No religion, no border, no country exists without violence. In every society, even when humans were in the hunter and gatherers, Stone Age, you always had that group of guys whose sole job was to defend, protect, and if need be, go and burn someone's village. So, I would be a part of that group.
The village burners.
Absolutely.
What if you had to defend yourself?
If I had to defend myself, pray for them, not me.
Wow.
For sure.
Do you think it may come to that? I mean, he might walk, and we're going to find out soon. He could be out next week.
Yeah, he could be out next week.
And he'll then know that you've been out doing these kind of interviews and, talking trash about him as he would see it. Others would think you've been honest. But if he's out and loose and dangerous as you think he is, and you're number one target.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and to the hour of our death. Amen. And I'll leave it at that.
What does that mean?
I walk in the light. I believe in my faith. I feel like that's what got me here and this far. And no weapon formed against me shall prosper.
Do you think, knowing him as you do you think he would try and have you killed, if not do it himself?
Yeah, people have tried to kill me before. Several times. I'll show you some footage. You want to see? Right, see, that's what I'm saying.
So explain this. What are you about to show me?
I'm about to show you a situation where a group of guys gang raped a young lady. Her mother came to me pretty much with her life savings and said she wanted retribution. A guy gets a knock upside his head, and then he puts a $50,000 bounty on my life, and it led to a series of cataclysms. And I was able to come out on top.
And we can see this?
Like
this
that.
one here, camera 3.
That was a bloody day.
So this is afterwards?
Yeah, this is and then I'll show you this. This is when they came to ambush me at the front door. I had to shoot through the door. That's blood on my feet, on the ground. And the guy that's screaming to call 911 is the person who was on the other end of the gunfire. So, I always say this, he came to kill me, but when he thought he was gonna die, he's begging for God and his mom and asking people to call 911. So, everybody's tough with girls and stuff like that. But I mean, there's always somebody to oblige you, whether your purpose is negative or positive.
Have you ever killed anyone? Would you tell me if you had?
Nope, not at all. I never harmed anyone who didn't deserve it.
What do you think is going to happen here with this case? Do you think he's going to walk?
I think he may be found guilty on some lesser charges. He might get 4 or 5 years, something like that. I don't really see him getting a life sentence. A lot of things were sensationalized in the inception of the trial. You see Busby coming out. What happened to the hotline with 2,000 people?
Yeah.
What happened to all of this? I'm aware of a lot of things taking place in back channels, people receiving a lot of payments. And
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
To shut them up?
Yeah, definitely. And the judges berating Combs about intimidating witnesses in the courtroom, just shows a level of arrogance. And
what did you make of Justin Bieber releasing a statement saying he was never abused by Diddy?
Justin Bieber seems to be a guy under a tremendous amount of pressure right now.
He does.
And I remember meeting him working as a bodyguard for a gentleman by the name of David Strauss, and he would take his nieces and nephews to Bieber concerts. I've been backstage several times. I've met him, and then seeing him now, he's like a shell of himself. There is a battle between good and evil taking place, and a lot of these people make agreements. And, you know, when Whitney Houston died, the last person to see her was Ray J. People don't speak about these things. Why does Bieber seem to be so emotionally unhinged right now? Especially when these topics get brought up, it seems you see the shame and the despair in his face. Just like you just asked me to divulge some information about violence in my history. It's gonna be the same thing for Mr. Bieber. You know, if I was to come up here and confess to malice murder, it would be untrue. And when you see these entertainers, you know, they do have a brand they have to protect. And any sign of weakness or partaking in lascivious acts, that could damage their credibility and their fan base. So, you know, I feel like some people's NDAs still haven't expired, you know. I gave certain people video of Combs coming out collecting everyone's cell phone himself personally. Why do you have to collect everyone's phone if we're gonna have a festive evening? You know, if you're gonna be doing things you're not supposed to do, you're probably gonna take everybody's phone. And you know, when you're promising people a career and their name in lights and all of these things, you're getting sweat equity out of them for just that instead of compensating them. People are gonna try to pursue litigation. That's all that's taking place.
Big homie, it's another amazing interview.
Thank you, sir.
You speak very eloquently about a world that I've never inhabited, but I've interviewed a lot of people from it. But they're often quite circumspect about what they reveal. You're unusual. You're very open about it. Is it, in a way, is this because you've left that world now in your head?
Yeah, you know, I don't want to be that person anymore. Because when I had to pivot my business, and once I see them, I'm like, oh, okay, you know, I need to do something about it. You know, every day I get messages from ladies telling me that they feel safer just knowing that I'm alive. And like, you know, that means a lot to me because, you know, without ladies, there is no life. So I think it should be a learning situation for a lot of people. And I feel like, especially as a black man, you know, I felt like the level of operations and the thought processes needed to be raised in my community. And I feel like I've been accomplishing that. And I'm happy about it. It's like I got 1,000 more moms and grandmoms. I get people pray for me every day. I'm in the grocery store hugging little ladies. I did what I was supposed to do, and it paid off for me. I'm blessed.
Big homie, great to meet you.
Yes, sir.
In my studio.
Absolutely.
I enjoy our conversations.
Yes, pleasure's mine, sir.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.